Blue Jays on Roundtable Sports contributing writer. Winter meetings kick off on Sunday night, and Bob Nightingale of USA Today says if the Blue Jays sign Kyle Tucker, that all but ends Bo Bichette's tenure in Toronto. Now,
look, I need to be straight with you about what's happening in Toronto right now, because this Bo Bichette situation is getting messy, and the latest insider intel is not what Blue Jays fans want to hear heading into these winter meetings. Bob Nightingale just dropped some information that's going to have Blue Jays fans questioning everything they thought they knew about this offseason. The Jays just spent $240 million on Dylan Cease and Cody Ponce. That's aggressive. That's the kind of spending that makes you think Toronto is going all in. But here is where it gets complicated, and this is what nobody's talking about enough. Everyone assumed the Blue Jays could afford to bring in Kyle Tucker and keep Bo Bichette. That was the plan, right? Sign Tucker, extend Bo, build this super team around Vlad Guerrero Jr., and finally compete with the Yankees and Orioles. Except Nightingale is saying that's probably not happening. In fact, he's suggesting that if Tucker signs in Toronto, it basically ends Bo Bichette's time with the Blue Jays. And get this, he could end up in Boston. Yes, Boston, the team Toronto has to see 19 times a season. Let me explain why this matters so much and why this is actually a bigger deal than people realize. Bo Bichette has been with this organization for 7 years. He's been part of the core. He's been part of what everyone thought was the foundation of Toronto's next great team. And now, because of financial realities and roster construction decisions, the Blue Jays might be forced to choose between him and Tucker. That's a brutal choice, but it's the choice they're facing. Tucker is obviously an incredible player. Over the last 5 years, he's been one of the most productive offensive players in baseball. Career .273 hitter, 147 home runs, 119 stolen bases over 8 seasons with Houston and Chicago. He does everything. He hits for average, hits for power, steals bases, plays solid defense. He's the complete package. And the Blue Jays desperately need what he brings, especially from the left side of the plate. Toronto's lineup has been way too right-handed for way too long. Vlad is right-handed, George Springer is right-handed, Alejandro Kirk is right-handed, Ernie Clement is right-handed. When you stack your lineup like that, opposing teams can exploit it. They can bring in right-handed specialists late in games and neutralize your best hitters. Tucker would help fix that problem. Pair him with Addison Barger, and suddenly you've got legitimate left-handed power in the middle of that order. Dalton Varsho gives you another lefty bat too. So the balance would actually start to make sense. But here is the thing. Tucker doesn't come cheap, and he doesn't come without complications. If Toronto signs him, the defensive lineman gets weird, at least for a year. Tucker would play outfield with Varsho and either Springer or Anthony Santander. One of those guys would have to DH. Neither Springer nor Santander is known for their defense at this point in their careers, but the Jays would have to use one of them in the outfield until Springer's contract expires at the end of the season. That's not ideal, but it's manageable for 1 year. Infield-wise, you'd probably see Barger move to third base, Clement at second, and Andres Jimenez at shortstop. That's a completely different look from what we saw last season, and it means Bo Bichette is out. Not on the bench, not in a utility role, out of Toronto entirely. Now let's talk about why losing Bichette hurts beyond just the baseball side of things. This is a guy who was supposed to be part of the core alongside Vlad and Springer. He was supposed to be here for the championship runs everyone's been waiting for. Instead, he might end up wearing a Red Sox uniform, helping Boston get better while Toronto tries to figure out if they made the right call. That's a tough pill to swallow for a fan base that's already been through so much disappointment. And here's what really bothers me about this whole situation. The Blue Jays are spending money. They're being aggressive. They dropped $240 million on pitching, and they're clearly in on Tucker. But are they spending it the right way? Are they building a roster that actually makes sense? Or are they making moves just to make moves? Because if you are forcing yourself to choose between Tucker and Bichette purely because of payroll constraints, that tells me the front office didn't plan this out as well as they should have. Nightingale specifically mentioned that George Springer's contract expires after this season, and Kevin Gausman's salary comes off the books too. That opens up financial flexibility for the future, which is great. But what about right now? What about this season? If the goal is to win immediately, which it should be, with Vlad entering his walk year, then Bichette walk. Why are you potentially sending him to a division rival? The Boston angle is what really stings. Imagine watching Bichette rake at Fenway Park while wearing a Red Sox jersey. Imagine him getting big hits against Toronto in September when the division's on the line. That's the kind of thing that haunts franchises for years. It's one thing to lose a player to free agency when you tried everything to keep him. It's another thing entirely to let him go because you had to make a choice between him and someone else and then watch him help your rival get better. Tucker is the better player right now. I am not arguing that. If you put Tucker and Bichette side by side and ask which one helps you win more games this season, it's Tucker. But baseball isn't just about one season. It's about building sustainable success. It's about having a core of players who grow together and learn how to win together. Bichette was supposed to be part of that core. Now, he might not be, and that raises questions about the long-term vision in Toronto. The other thing that worries me is what this says about the Blue Jays' ability to develop and retain their own talent. They drafted Bichette. They developed him. They watched him become an all-star. And now they might let him walk because they're chasing someone else's. I get that you have to make tough decisions in this business, but when you can't find a way to keep both guys, especially when you are already spending $240 million elsewhere, it makes you wonder if the financial structure is as solid as ownership wants us to believe. Don't get me wrong, Tucker would be an incredible addition. He makes the Blue Jays better immediately. He gives them balance. He gives them another legitimate star to put alongside Vlad. But if the cost is losing Bichette to Boston, I am not sure the math works out the way Toronto thinks it does. And that's the disappointing part of all this. The Blue Jays are finally being aggressive, finally spending money, finally acting like a team that wants to compete. But they might still end up making a decision that hurts them in the division for years to come. The winter meetings start Sunday night in Orlando, and Toronto is going to be the talk of baseball after signing Cease and Ponzi. They might continue to be the most aggressive team out there, but being aggressive doesn't always mean being smart. And this Bichette situation is going to tell us a lot about whether the Blue Jays front office really knows what they're doing or if they're just throwing money around and hoping it works out.